YouTube Zicko and the Goat House is back. Today I'm going through the quarterbacks that I think will be on different NFL teams in 2023. We're going to talk about which teams those are, which teams will be getting new quarterbacks. And I'm going to give you a second option as well. If they're not, if these quarterbacks aren't on this team, they'll be on this team. So going over 20 different quarterbacks. We'll talk about 20 different quarterbacks here. I had to get bold with this one because not only am I predicting free agency in a way, not only am I predicting some trades, I'm also predicting some quarterbacks to get cut and then signed to other teams. So, yeah, had to get creative with this one. Very realistic landing spots, though, for sure. Really excited about it. Full NFL coverage here at the Goat House. We already got a bunch of content covering the offseason. More to come. I cannot wait for free agency. Our free agency grade videos, some of my favorite. Follow us on Twitter, live news, rumors, updates. Always talk with you guys on there. There's a link pinned in the comments for that. Subscribers on Twitter get bonus content. Links pinned in the comments for our sponsors and our Discord, which you can now join. Check out those sponsors, code GOAT on some of those sites. Rocking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers chain from the GLD shop right now. They have all NFL teams and a lot more sick stuff. Code GOAT there. Links pinned in the comments. It all starts with Derek Carr. I mean, where he goes can change everything for other teams, for other quarterbacks. That's what I realized here. So we're going to start with the guy I think it kind of starts with. I think you also can factor in Aaron Rodgers. It kind of starts with him as well. We'll talk about him next. But Derek Carr, I was kind of feeling the Saints for most of the time. That was maybe more so if he was traded. But even, after he was cut, it still kind of felt like the Saints. But now recently, visiting with the Jets, hearing very positive things about those meetings, about those interviews, and they really feel like Derek Carr fits well. And he ultimately, he has a decision to make. It's up to him to decide, Jets or Saints, which will appeal to him more. And right now, you hear positive things about the Jets. So I'm kind of leaning towards Jets because that's where everything's leaning right now. My next guess would be the Saints, though it really feels like Jets or Saints. So we'll see where he goes. And if he doesn't go to the Jets, if we'll say he goes to the Saints, then the Jets they're kind of already in the mix about Aaron Rodgers trade, but they could be back into that. We'll talk about Aaron Rodgers. They could be in on Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll talk about Jimmy Garoppolo. I've heard Ryan Tannehill pop up. We'll talk about Ryan Tannehill as well. So one thing here at the top, starting with Derek Carr, if he doesn't go to the Jets, it changes my predictions for a lot of these. So that's why, buckle up. It's going to be an interesting offseason when it just comes to the quarterbacks. And we talk about all the other positions, all the other thing has to do with football. It's going to be very entertaining. So right now, feeling the Jets for Derek Carr could very well end up back on the Saints. Will it be about money? Will it be about fit, the talent there, the situation for the future? You can argue either teams, they're pretty evenly talented maybe right now. The Jets are a little younger, more upside. If the Saints are healthy, you'd probably say that maybe they're a little bit more... It's debatable. Yeah, I'd say they're a little better today if they're healthier. But maybe it's about money for Derek Carr. So we will see where he decides. I think some people like scratch the Saints off the list for Derek Carr when he didn't get, said he didn't want to get traded. People thought he didn't want to get traded to the Saints. I don't think that was the case. I think he just wanted to be a free agent, have his options, go visit teams, and just make his decision, that way, which makes sense. And screw over the Raiders maybe too. So that makes a little more sense to me. Next to Aaron Rodgers, who the Jets are in the mix for, I'm going to go Raiders. And I kind of been saying this as well. They were it felt like they were going to be in on Tom Brady. He retired. Maybe they were going to be in on Aaron Rodgers no matter what as well. I just felt like they were going to look for a veteran quarterback that can help them win now. They're going to move on from Derek Carr. Doesn't really feel, they did move on from him, but their thinking was we're going to move on from Derek Carr not to get worse at the core, because that's a good quarterback you're moving on from, not to get worse or go for a project. You're trying to win now. You're trying to get better. McDaniels is sick of, probably already because it didn't work out with him in Denver, and it didn't work out the first year in Las Vegas. I don't think he's going to take his good old time with this. So they'll be in on a guy like Aaron Rodgers. They have some draft capital to trade for him. They have Devontae Adams there, which is pretty appealing as well. The value is the big question because, well, first, it actually sounds like Aaron Rodgers might really be traded. I wasn't counting on it the last 2 years. I wasn't really buying into it. It was a little more interesting last year compared to the year before. 2 years ago, I was like, it's not going to happen. He's going back to the Packers. Last year, I was saying he's going back to the Packers, but hey, maybe it's possible here. This year, I'm saying, yeah, I'm leaning towards I think it's going to happen. And you see these reports coming out that the Packers are ready to move on. They're kind of sick of it, Rodgers, and they like Jordan Love. They want him to be the starter. Not only that, but it just makes sense for Jordan Love to be the starter. Now's the time to figure out if this is the guy, And then you factor in how they structured Aaron Rodgers' contract just a year ago. And it just looks like they were planning on trading him in either a year or two, a year being today, like right now, and in 2 years, maybe next year is like the possibility, I suppose, if they don't trade him this year. So it just, for all those reasons, it really feels like now's the time. And the Raiders make the most sense right now. We know the Jets have had interest. I heard the Packers asking price was too high, and I'm wondering if the value could definitely drop. The leverage could be lost if those recent reports are indeed accurate, that they decided on Jordan Love already. Then the value kind of goes down a little bit, like if they just want to get him out of there, so they're not going to give him away for nothing, though. Let's be clear on that. It's still going to take quite a bit. But the question is, do you trade for Aaron Rodgers if you're the Raiders, if you're the Jets? We're looking at the Raiders, they'd be a lot better than they were last year. They'd be really good. They could be considered a contender. But, the Packers couldn't do it. They did at one point, but recently couldn't get to where they were trying to get to, which was a Super Bowl. They were super underwhelming in the playoffs. They came up short, and that was with Aaron Rodgers, a little younger Aaron Rodgers. That was with a little younger Devontae Adams. They got these two back together. They couldn't do it with the better offensive line. I think a better coach, better play caller in Green Bay, and possibly a better defense. They got a lot to work on with that defense as well, but I do like Patrick Graham as defense coordinator. I like Max Crosby. I love me some Max Crosby, guys like that. But are they going to sell a lot of future to just come up short, so it's a gamble there. But this is kind of where I'm feeling right now. A team, the Raiders, will have a new quarterback next year because Derek Carr's already gone, and Aaron Rodgers, I'm predicting here to be on a new team, and that'll be the Raiders. So the third guy here, and these two guys play a big part of this guy, Jimmy Garoppolo, because we'll say, if the Jets don't get Derek Carr, I think the chances of Garoppolo ending up there shoots up. It could be Garoppolo, it could be Rodgers, it could be Tannehill, guys like that. But if the Raiders don't get Aaron Rodgers, I think they're getting Jimmy Garoppolo. So that I think it's a very strong chance, I should say, that they're getting Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's why this one's really, really tough. I'm kind of banking on my first two predictions being right with this one because I can easily put under next guess, or my first guess, Jets or Raiders, or my next guess, Jets or Raiders. So this is where it gets a little bold, and this is where I kind of rely on my first two predictions. So let's say my first two predictions are accurate, and I think they are very realistic. Then where the hell is Jimmy Garoppolo going to go? And the first team actually, if it's not those two that I think of, is the Houston Texans, because they have D'Amico Ryans from the San Francisco 49ers over there, who's a defensive guy, but they got Slowick over there, who's an offensive guy from the 49ers. So that makes just so much sense. I was originally going to go with the Texans here, but do the Texans just bring in Jimmy Garoppolo just to draft a quarterback second overall? Who knows? Maybe they trade up one spot. Whatever. They're going to take a quarterback, it feels like. It's been reported that they'll take a quarterback. I don't really follow those things. I think they're going to take quarterbacks. I think they're going to take a quarterback, not because that random report. But so do they sign Jimmy Garoppolo just to draft a guy that high? And is that guy, I guess there's a scenario where that guy sits behind Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't really agree with drafting a quarterback 2, or maybe, like we said, maybe 1. 2 at the latest, and then not starting him. I don't agree with that at all, especially in the state of the Houston Texans. So it doesn't make sense. Is Jimmy Garoppolo even signed there when he knows this team might draft a quarterback? If it's not this year, it's next year. Do I sign there? So that's where, the Texans make a lot of sense, but at the same time, they don't make a whole lot of sense. But then you could argue a scenario where they sign Jimmy Garoppolo and then they just draft a stud defender like Jalen Carter or Will Anderson for that D'Amico Ryans defense, and they might be better off. And then a really good quarterback class next year, they might be better off. So it's you could argue a case that's yes, Garoppolo or the Texans, and you can argue a case where it's no, they're taking a quarterback and they're starting that quarterback right away. So I thought of the Falcons. If the way I was playing this was if he doesn't go to the Jets or Raiders. When you look at odds, probably, I haven't seen the odds for Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know if an app or site has that. But I'd imagine the Jets and the Raiders are actually towards the top, and it kind of makes sense. The Jets and the Raiders are probably at the top for multiple guys. Guys we talked about already. But I'm just kind of playing this as if my first two are right. And I could see the Falcons. Jimmy Garoppolo's supposed to get a lot of interest. The Falcons are a team with a lot of money. I don't think they could be sold on Desmond Ridder. You third round pick, you don't have a lot of stock and value put into that. You're not insisting. I think Arthur Smith's had enough. I think he wants to win right now. I think they'll be interested in trading for a guy, actually, possibly if if available. We'll actually talk about those guys. I think the Falcons could be in the mix for those guys. So the Falcons will be active. I think they're, and some people might look at the Falcons and go, that's kind of like a rebuild team, maybe not early stages of rebuild, but they're kind of in there. I'd say not so fast. I think they're trying to turn this around right now. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo can run that Arthur Smith offense, and they're going to run the ball first, but he's going to make sure he get a guy like that can get a quarterback that can get the ball to a guy like Kyle Pitts and Drake London. I think Garoppolo can do that. So it makes sense, but it makes sense only if the Jets and the Raiders are out on Jimmy Garoppolo, and for that to be the case, they'll be having to get Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers, like kind of like I had. The Texans make a lot of sense, but again, we're watching the Jets and the Raiders here. We are definitely watching them. Next, let's talk about the Bears and Marcus Mariota here, is who I think this is where we kind of get a little bold, where it's kind of like a, kind of up in the air for these guys that could be backups. And it's a guy that has starting caliber. And the Bears, there's some rumors. We'll talk about the Bears and Justin Fields. Some rumors that some people think I think most people think he won't be dealt, but some people think he will be dealt. It's a possibility. Justin Fields also had an injury last year. Just having a guy like Mariota who kind of can fit that style offense that the Bears kind of adjusted to or switched to. I said that Patriots game. It makes some sense there. So Mariota, a backup that could be a starter if something happens with the Bears, a different situation happens, with them. And then next has to be the Colts. I do think he kind of can fit what they're trying to do over there with Shane Steichen. They're looking for a they're going to look for a quarterback in the draft, but they'll probably bring in a guy like this too. Possibly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but in a second. But I just, for some reason, I guess you got to kind of get bold with this one, but I see Mariota with the Bears. Whether that, and we'll talk about Fields and the Bears in a little bit once again, but it makes some sense to me. I just kind of a feeling that I got. Speaking of the Colts, I think Gardner Minshew is a legit option here. Looking for a quarterback like this that could, if we need him to start, he can start, but possibly could be competing with the rookie. Just makes a lot of sense. Also, you have a guy, Shane Steichen, from the Eagles offense coordinator coming in there. Obviously experienced with Gardner Minshew, so it makes sense. And I think the perfect scenario is to draft a quarterback to be a starter, but having this guy that can start, because again, you can't really predict the draft, makes some sense. He very well could end up back with the Eagles. They feel comfortable with him as their second quarterback. I very well could see that. So that was a tough one not to have him go back to the Eagles, but I could see the Colts as well. Maybe they be willing to pay a little bit more there to have him as a starter until further notice, until we find that quarterback in the future, which maybe things, draft is unpredictable. Weird things happen, so maybe they don't get that guy. So thought that made sense to me. Speaking of Colts, let's talk about the Colts' last quarterback, Matt Ryan. I went really bold with this one. Matt Ryan and the Chiefs is what I came up with. And I could see Matt Ryan going to a team and being a starter. My next guess was the Saints. Saints kind of looking for that guy like Derek Carr. If they can't get him, can they get a Matt Ryan? I kind of could see that. And maybe he'll like to go over there with a better offensive line than he had in Indy and be that starter. But the Chiefs popped in my mind, and I liked it. Chad Henne retiring, veteran quarterback, just, he's there because of his knowledge. A guy that can just step in and play and understand the offense. And I think that's what Matt Ryan is. And Matt Ryan could, before he's ready to retire, maybe could just want to go, win a Super Bowl that, he was very close to having. So going and backing up Patrick Mahomes and kind of being that smart, a good quarterback mind in that room makes some sense to me. So kind of a gut feeling here, and definitely went bold with this one. But I could see a team like the Saints. The first team that popped in my mind with Matt Ryan was the Rams, actually. I could just see him like another Stafford type. Stafford's a lot better, but another that type of quarterback, and Stafford's been getting injured. So to have him next up makes some sense. But then I was like, yeah, the Rams with their offensive line, it's, they probably think, Matt Ryan's not the best idea for that offensive line. So, but the Chiefs as a backup behind Mahomes actually made some sense. But Ryan could be going somewhere. Who knows? He could retire, but he probably would have happened by now. But he could go somewhere, could be interested only in going somewhere where he has a chance to start. And then speaking of another former Colts quarterback who was the Commanders quarterback this year, I went with the Panthers for Carson Wentz. Yeah, Frank Reich is there, and it sounded like Frank Reich was in charge of that move that they eventually made in Indianapolis because he coached Carson Wentz. He kind of felt like he can fix them. And they won some ball games there. It was disappointing at the end, that last game of the year, but maybe some more time with him. And they're probably looking to draft a quarterback anyway, so kind of get Wentz right now, a guy that's kind of familiar with your offense, the offense you're trying to run, just in case they don't get that guy. Maybe he can mentor that guy, and he's kind of the starter until further notice here, I suppose, at one of those situations. So that makes some sense. He's kind of hard to plug anywhere else. I mean, there's probably going to be teams that just aren't interested. There's probably going to be teams that he won't play for because he'll feel like he won't be starting. He'll have no chance to start. So, Reich with the Panthers made some sense. And I put the Buccaneers next. To talk about the Buccaneers a little bit more in a little bit, but yeah, trying to figure out where the Buccaneers are at is interesting. I think I know where they're at, actually, where they're kind of heading, but it could be a bridge quarterback or kind of could be a young, bridge quarterback, rebuild quarterback. Wentz isn't that young part, really, but kind of could be that bridge quarterback guy they give a shot to, so maybe the Buccaneers there, but the connection with Reich and the Panthers made some sense to me. And then Panthers quarterback in the early portion of last year, last played for the Rams, Baker Mayfield. I end up plugging in with the Saints here, and the Saints very well connected. Like I said at the start of this video, it all starts with Derek Carr. That's why I started with him in the video. The Saints very well could end up with Derek Carr. I was predicting that for some time. Very well could. I'm predicting the Jets right now, but it's close to 50-50, and that changes a lot. There was some rumors that the Saints could turn their attention to Baker Mayfield if they miss out on Derek Carr, and I can see that. I can see the fit there and kind of being a bridge guy and kind of see what we got in Baker Mayfield. Could we kind of revive his career? We saw it early in the Browns' career, then it kind of tailed off, and then it wasn't good in Carolina, but looked pretty decent with the LA Rams, but they got Stafford back, and he wants to be a starter. So, the Saints could give him a trial run, see how he is. They could possibly draft one as well. Remember, they gained a first-round pick with that Sean Payton trade. That was huge. So that's why it kind of made sense. He very well could end up back in the Rams because I don't think a whole lot of teams would be interested. But some teams will have some interest and potentially give him a go as a starter like the Saints. But could very well just end up back with the Rams because that kind of worked out fit. And they'll need a serious number 2 quarterback because Stafford has the injury concern. Definitely has an injury concern. So we'll see. If the Saints don't land Derek Carr, I have a number of guys we'll talk about for the Saints. Like next guess, I already said Matt Ryan and Derek Carr, so I guess we already kind of started on the list. But Baker Mayfield kind of made some sense. And it's kind of been rumored as well, so I guess we'll follow that a little bit there with that one. Another former Saints quarterback who very well could end up back with the Saints. You see the next guest Saints, but I think they're looking for that future quarterback. And Baker, who we just talked about, the future quarterback? It's probably not, but it's a maybe. We'll see how he works out and we draft a guy. But who knows? They could very well bring Andy Dalton back. But I was feeling the Commanders with this one. To me, it just kind of just hit me like a team where he can go to be a mentor, and in this case, Sam Howell, and be a key backup because we still don't know what Sam Howell is about. I like the idea of him in Washington, definitely. But so a key backup here, as if he has to step in and play, but as a mentor as well. So I just kind of felt right. Andy Dalton to Washington, but he played all right for the Saints. Just missing that extra firepower, I thought. But other than that, played all right. Wish there was a little more to give him playoffs, like I said. But who knows? Could end up back there. But Washington felt right to me. So that's what I came up with there. Another former Saints quarterback, Jameis Winston, went bold on this one with the Baltimore Ravens. And we'll talk about Lamar Jackson in a little bit. But yeah, if Lamar Jackson's not there, I think this is realistic. If Lamar Jackson is there, I think this is realistic. I guess the only downside, I'll say, in this scenario, if Lamar Jackson's there, which again, we'll talk about Lamar and the Ravens in a little bit, but the only downside is Winston was probably a little disappointing. I think he was just a little disappointed that he wasn't starting with the Saints. So why, if Lamar Jackson's there, why would he go here to be a backup? I don't know if he'll have that much of a market. I think he should. I still, Winston's not going to go out there and win you a bunch of playoff games, anything like that, but there's not a whole lot of quarterbacks that will do that. I think he should be higher on the list than some other guys. It's just my opinion. But I think he probably sits around. Well, first the Saints would have to cut him. So that has to happen first. Some of these other guys we've been talking about, some of those are cut, some of those free agency, some of the Rodgers would be a trade. But first they'd have to cut him. And then I think you'd sit around for a little bit because the number of other quarterbacks that are available. And then I look at the Ravens, who maybe are adjusting their offense a little bit, bringing in Todd Monken and kind of looking for a guy that can, move out of the pocket if he needs to, but sling the football first. And then factor in that Todd Monken was actually his offensive coordinator with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where, he threw the ball away to the other team a little bit, but he was very productive, and he had some pretty decent years in there. So I thought that made some sense. And even if Lamar's there, he has some injury concern, things like that. If he's not, then he's competing for a starting job. Next guess, I'll actually go with the Broncos, not even the Saints, who he's under contract with. I think they'll cut him. But I'll go with the Broncos, and they have Sean Payton there, who was a fan of Jameis Winston. So I thought that actually made a lot of sense as well. So Ravens and Broncos are who I'm looking out for there. And then another former Saints quarterback was with the Miami Dolphins this year, been bouncing around a little bit. I like the Broncos for Teddy Bridgewater. With Sean Payton there, he was a fan of Bridgewater. I think Bridgewater's a guy that is good with being a backup, good with being like somewhat of a high-end number 2. And that's like a guarantee of what he'll be with the Denver Broncos. Yes, Russell Wilson will be the starter, but who knows what's going to happen with him. But I would imagine he'd be the starter all year. But getting a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, who's familiar with Sean Payton, that offense, who I think Sean Payton likes, and just having a quality second string there, I thought that made sense. And I put the Saints as the second option. Going back to New Orleans, if Dalton and Winston are out, bring back a familiar face, some of the similar staff members there, same staff members. So I thought that made some sense as well there. So Broncos and Saints came to mind with the Dolphins. Speaking of the Dolphins, this is kind of a random one. I have very random, because the Steelers would have to cut Trubisky first, and I've hearing reports they like Trubisky still. They're trying to work their way around that. I think you got to cut him. I think when he played, he had to come back in a game too, the Ravens game. It didn't look good. I think you got to cut him there, but maybe they rework that deal and bring him back. I can just see him as, well, really, do I think the Dolphins should, is this a great move by the Dolphins? I don't really think so. I think with Tua, who I think is good, but I think the Dolphins need to look a little more seriously at the starting quarterback position, just because the injury concern of Tua Tagovailoa. But I just don't think they're going to do that. And they're in their eyes, they're going to get a quality number 2 that has some experience. And I just see Trubisky as a backup behind Tua there. That's kind of what I see. And they have Skylar Thompson as well, so those guys can kind of battle it out. And maybe they'll be good with Skylar Thompson there, but I think their solution of, I think most people out there are like, man, they might have to get a starter because Tua's injury concern, the concussion concern. They should get a starter, but I think they don't want that, and their fix is to have 2 decent number 2s, and that'll be Thompson, and in this case, Trubisky. But there were reports the Steelers would like to keep him around because they like him, but they got to change that contract. So he very well could end up back with the Steelers there. Speaking of the Steelers quarterbacks, if they move on from Trubisky, they very well can end up with Mason Rudolph. This is another kind of random one on the landing spot, but Mason Rudolph, probably I would imagine he thought he was better than both the quarterbacks. Not that I'm saying I agree with him or disagree. I think halfway agree with that. I think he could be better than Trubisky, to be honest. So he's maybe a little disappointed that he didn't get more of a chance. So he could look to go elsewhere. And the Lions, I think, could view Mason Rudolph as a quality backup behind Jared Goff, kind of fitting that offense there. And I do think they could be in need of a better backup quarterback here. And he should be on the cheaper side. And the Lions aren't looking to spend big on a backup quarterback, anything like that. They're looking to spend big where they can in free agency and will at other important positions, looking at defense as well. But yeah, just kind of a feeling here. Just made sense as a backup with the Lions behind Goff. But could end up back with the Steelers there as well. Next up, Mike White I have with the Rams. The Jets, maybe he's back with the Jets. They liked him a little bit there. I think they're looking to get a guy like Derek Carr or somebody. We talked about that a little bit. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it. But, so Mike White could be going elsewhere, and LaFleur is now, from the Jets, is now with the Rams as offensive coordinator. So maybe it's really going to depend on what he thinks of him. Maybe he thinks he wasn't good enough. Maybe he thinks he's got some potential. I like to think he's got a little more potential, and it'd be a pretty good backup behind Matthew Stafford. I think a really good fit there with that offense and kind of be on the cheaper side. And it'd be important to find a decent backup with some experience. So Mike White with the LA Rams makes some sense, a lot of sense to me for those reasons. And then next, Packers, I got Taylor Heineke with the Packers, and I don't have the Commanders on here. I definitely could see him as the commander, remaining as the Commander's backup behind Sam Howell. We could see that for sure, but went a little bold and have the Packers and the Raiders up here. It's just something I can see. It's just something I can see. It's just there's really no specific reason, but him, they got to trade Rodgers first, and then Heineke behind Jordan Love. Having a very quality backup behind Jordan Love in that Packers offense. It's just something I could kind of see here. And the Raiders could be, it depends on what the Raiders do. They could end up with Aaron Rodgers. But then Jarrett Stidham's a free agent. I think they very well could make an offer to bring him back. But they could view Heineke as a pretty quality backup there. Maybe a guy for the future they could hang around. And Scott Turner is now working with the Raiders. So it's going to depend on Scott Turner's thoughts on Heineke. So that kind of, usually when it comes to those quarterbacks that are like maybe starters or a backup, connection has a lot to do with it. And we actually saw that as a pattern throughout this video. But that's actually a thing, when just bringing in a guy that, he just in case, like he might be a starter. We might, try to get a guy in the draft, but we don't know what's going to happen. He might have to be a starter or he might be a backup, and we like to have that mind in there working with the starting quarterback. Getting a guy that fits is huge, and having that connection, that insurance, like just knowing that he knows how to work that offense, so that's why I have that connection of Scott Turner there, even though I don't think it's not my top pick with the Raiders. But I've had that throughout this video a lot of connections with coaches, familiar faces. That is kind of the reason for it. And then next, Drew Lock I have with the Buccaneers. It's not really a surprise. People probably already thought that, but I'm beginning to think more and more. It's more likely that the Buccaneers are heading into rebuild. One, because they should probably, because they're in a big hole in terms of cap space. They weren't good enough last year, even with Tom Brady, so they're not really going to be good enough if they force something this year, like some people are talking about. Jimmy Garoppolo, guys like that, they'll be pretty decent, but it just wouldn't make any sense to me. But recently I saw, and this isn't a for sure thing yet, but since Tom Brady retired, he actually has cap hit still on these next couple years because of a restructure. But since he retired, it's a rule that you can take a portion of this year's cap hit since he's retired and push it into next year, so you're not hit with all of it this year. And teams usually do that, especially a team like the Buccaneers. But I've heard, and then they're in a hole right now. So remember, they're in a hole. They got to dig themselves out. So you think, okay, they want to dish some of that cap space in the future because to assist themselves getting out of the hole. But I've heard they don't want to do that. They want to pay it all right now. They don't want to pay any next year. And the only reason that makes sense to me, well, what's the obvious here? They don't want to hurt their future. They don't care that they're hurt right now at the cap space, and they're going to hurt more by that Brady retirement, So that kind of, what does that say? That says they want to focus on the future. So they want to focus on the future. They're kind of going to rebuild here. So Drew Lock could be that bridge guy that they also kind of can give a look to. Maybe he has upside still and kind of battle Kyle Trask there. Young guys kind of battle, and they could draft one as well. So having those guys, maybe a three-way battle between some young guys, it's a strong possibility. They also hired the Seahawks quarterback coach as their offensive coordinator, so that there's a link there, a connection there. But then going back to the Seahawks as the backup to Geno, I think is a possibility as well. So I'm looking out for the Bucs and the Seahawks for Drew Lock. It just made some sense for the Bucs. I really think they're kind of going in rebuild, which I think they should do. I think that'd be smart. But what do they do with some veteran pieces? That'd be interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see. Interesting team to watch this offseason here. And Jacoby Brissett, I like with the Cardinals. I like with the Texans a lot as well. And there's actually some other time. I mean, he played so well with the Browns, actually. Like, he played better than Deshaun Watson, but there's reasons why, obviously. But then Deshaun Watson will be the starter next year. But he could end up with the Browns again. And I thought if the Eagles lose Minshew, I thought if the Eagles make some sense behind Jalen Hurts. That actually makes a lot of sense. But the Cardinals and the Texans that come to mind right away. The Cardinals, who actually just hired Drew Pensing as their offense coordinator, was the Browns quarterback coach, so there's a connection there. But the Cardinals also may need a starting quarterback for the start of next year because Kyler Murray is injured. So you got a guy that kind of fits, plug and play to start right away, week one, that kind of fits what they're trying to do in that new offense, that new system, the new staff, obviously. And it's a guy that has the experience starting, but a guy that has experience doing that, like filling in for guys and Getting the job done here and there, not perfectly, obviously. So, and he's played in this system more than Kyler Murray has, so he kind of can be that mentor for him as well. So that made a lot of sense to me. The Texans make some sense too. Like, this would be the guy they get, and then draft a guy as well. But they very well can go Davis Mills and draft a guy. So, and then Casero actually was part of the Patriots when they took Brissett too. So some connection there. Obviously there's a connection with the Browns, and then with the Eagles as well. Sirianni was in Indianapolis. Yeah. So there's some teams I like for Brissett, but the Cardinals made the most sense, so that'd be my prediction there. And then three, a little bit different than the rest of the video, three other guys I want to talk about. Justin Fields, I have remaining with the Bears, so it's a little different than what this video was supposed to be, but there's been some talk, and there's been a lot more talk recently that the Bears very well could trade Fields and draft a quarterback. And I understand the talk. I understand it, and I know it's mainly Bears fans. They get pretty upset with that, but I mean, there's not really to get upset about. You can understand the thinking and the discussions, the debate. You can understand it whether you agree with it or not. The Bears they have the first overall pick. Not every team, there's teams that never had the first overall pick. Not every time you get that. You're going to do your homework on everybody. So you're going to do your homework on the quarterbacks. And if you watch the film and break down evaluate these quarterbacks, and you're going, man, I love this guy, whether it's CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, whoever it is, this is a can't-miss guy. This is a near-future elite quarterback. This is the guy that can win a Super Bowl, because there's not too many quarterbacks that win a Super Bowl. If you come away saying that, then you got to take that guy. Like, you have to. You have to. When it comes to the quarterback position, and you'd say most likely they don't come away saying that much about that guy. So, therefore, you have a guy right now that it's still a little bit up in the air on what he's going to be. Then you might as well stick with him, give him another year, and kind of look to next year, possibly make a decision next year. But if they sit down and say, this is a can't miss guy, he's an elite quarterback, he's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, they're going to stay at one, they're going to take him, and they're going to see what they can get from Fields. So there's some sort of chance that could happen. There's some sort of chance there. So I understand why people say it, think it, talk about it a little bit. It's a fun little discussion. I'm going to say most likely, which I think everyone agrees, most likely he's back with the Bears. They could deal that first pick, which they got to be a little careful with, because the same thing, if it's not a quarterback, like say it's Jalen Carter, they fall in love with that prospect. We got to have this guy, got to be careful with the trade a little bit. So if they go back to 4, do the Cardinals take him at 3? It's a different debate, but, and then somebody else can go up and get the quarterback there, so that it's definitely interesting to think about. My thinking is, and I'm not sold on Fields yet. This take I'm about to say, I talked about on Twitter too, has really nothing to do with Fields, but my thinking is they kind of should, again, unless they come away saying this guy's elite, this draft prospect's elite, he's going to win a Super Bowl, you take him, then I'd say, all right, stick to what stick to your evaluations, good for you, not being afraid to get better, go get him. So I'm good with it if that's their thinking, right? But my thinking is, I don't know if there's that quarterback in this class. I mean, there's their talent. Like, Bryce Young has so much talent, but there's some concern with the size, the durability. And then Stroud's very, very good as well. He actually has some strengths where Fields is kind of missing, but then Fields is more athletic than him. But Stroud, a little better reading the field, a little bit better in the pocket, but two Ohio State quarterbacks there. But, yeah, my thinking is, trade that first pick, get a bunch of picks. I think the best thing they can do is that and get more picks for this year, but not only that, invest in 2024 picks, because that's a really good class at the top. I mean, what especially what the Bears could need in the future. I mean, I like some of those tackles at the top, like elite tackles, and they could be a little bit better than this year's, at least the top 2 guys maybe. So that's fantastic. Receiver, big difference, especially at the top. Guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State guy. And then quarterback. So if you give Justin Fields a shot this year to really for sure see what he's about, which makes sense, then you kind of can make the decision next year when you got guys like Drake May, when you got guys like Caleb Williams, and I still believe in Quinn Ewers, which is it's a rough topic right now, but that's a strong class. Those are legit NFL quarterback prospects. So you make that decision then while you stocked up on draft picks now. So that makes the most sense. That's not me saying I'm all in on Fields. That's not really me saying that. He definitely has a lot of upside. The arm talent is there, but using that arm talent more often is the thing. reading the field a little bit better, being a little more accurate underneath throws, getting the ball out a little quicker, things like that. We see what he can do in the legs, and he's a sturdy dude. Staying healthy is a big thing as well. Got to be better, and hanging on to the football. He put the ball on the ground quite a bit the last 2 years. So there's some things it's still up in the air. There's definitely, and there's a crowd out there that says, he's the guy. Like, he's for sure going to be good. I'd say you're wrong to say that right now. And there's guys like, he's not it. Like, he's not the guy. Trade him. Draft the guy right now. I'd say that's not it either. I think we're kind of right in the middle there. So I'm going to say he's back with the Bears. But I do think, even though I don't think he's going to be on our team, I do think it's a realistic discussion. And next guess, and there's a lot of talk about the Panthers out there. There's a lot of talk. I think I could see people talking about the Colts kind of fitting that Shane Steichen offense. But I look at the Falcons, looking for that quarterback of the future. They might maybe like him better than what they would get at 8. I think he can fit that Arthur Smith scheme. I think you can get more out of him possibly. And then the guy who drafted him is there on staff, and Ryan Pace. So he traded up for him, so he's got to think highly of him as well. But if you're the other team, what do you trade for Justin Fields when he's still a mystery? Like, in my opinion, I don't trade that 8th overall pick. I don't do it. So, and that kind of makes it more of maybe less likely of it to actually happen. Do teams in the Bears agree on compensation if the Bears have him as a backup, like if they're decided like we're going to drive this guy as a starter, then I guess they're good with accepting something less than what people were talking about there. But I'd say he's back on the Bears, but it is an interesting debate. It's been talked about a lot lately as well. And then Lamar Jackson, the same thing. I got the Falcons again on there, which I can debate as the next guess as some teams. It's just hard for me to see him elsewhere right now. I just see him on the Baltimore Ravens. I think Todd Monken coming in. I think it's like the same, but it's different. I think it's like some similarities. They're gonna get the quarterback out in space, or you're gonna have the quarterback run the ball a bit. They're gonna feature the tight ends. But they're gonna focus a little bit more on that passing game under Todd Monken. That's his style of offense, scheming guys open, getting Jackson out on space, but maybe leaning towards having him pass more than run more when he's out in space, if they can. So I like the fit there, and they're gonna tag him, and then they're gonna have some time to work on an extension. And if they can't agree to it, then they're going to trade him. And the reports have said that they're pretty far apart, and there's some time to figure it out. But if they're really far apart, usually those things don't change a whole lot, and that they'd actually be open to trading him, is what it came out as the reports. And there's going to be teams lining up, which anybody could have guessed that. So how much do you pay a very good quarterback, but a very good football player in general, but a guy that has some serious durability issues looking at the end of last 2 seasons. So that is the tough part. So they could trade him, and the Commanders pop up, the Panthers pop up, maybe the Colts. But I look at the Falcons too, and the Falcons got a load of money. They have that 8th overall pick. It's a little bit better of a pick than I think the 2 teams I'd put in the conversation next would be the Panthers, which they're 1 pick better. The Panthers and the Commanders. So I think that plays a part here. They can fit that system over there. It's kind of the guy they're looking for the future. They can pay him a ton of money. They were very close to trying to deal for Deshaun Watson and paying him a bunch of money. They'd be willing to do it for Lamar Jackson. So the Falcons kind of make the most sense if he's not going to be on the Ravens, in my opinion. It's going to be a fun offseason if this kind of talk continues. And then one more, we'll talk about Ryan Tannehill, which the Titans could look to trade. Just find the quarterback of the future possibly, or just get better. Maybe they try to get in on a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, perhaps, if they do that. Clear that cap space by moving on from Tannehill. That could be the reason. The Jets have been linked to Ryan Tannehill, actually. There's been some reports that they're interested, and actually more interested than people think. But I think they have kind of like a list. I think it feels like Derek Carr's at the top of it right now. But Aaron Rodgers can be in the mix somewhere in that list, and it should be. And then Jimmy Garoppolo's probably in there, and Ryan Tannehill's on there. But the reports were from Jets reporters that, and I heard it actually from Titans guys first, and I wasn't, really sure that the Jets could be interested in their guy, the Titans guy there. And then it kind of came out the Jets were, and it was been reported that the Jets are actually higher on Tannehill than people think. So if the Jets don't get Derek Carr and they feel like Aaron Rodgers is too expensive, or they can't get him, he goes to the Raiders, and maybe they don't want to sign Garoppolo. Maybe he's too pricey. They go for the 1 year, $27 million remaining on Ryan Tannehill and work from there. So that's a possibility. So if the Jets start missing on guys, and this kind of can shift towards the Jets being my prediction, maybe the Titans deal. At the same time, I kept hearing that like Vrabel and these guys were keeping Tannehill in they're discussing with him and kind of keeping him in the loop with we're hiring Rand Carthen as the GM, but more so on the staff, we're hiring Tim Kelly as offense coordinator. They were kind of, they're not asking, I don't know if they were actually asking him, like, is this the guy you want? I think they were just kind of discussing with him, though. And they brought in Outen as well, so that made it seem like they're already set, ready to go with Tannehill being the guy this year. But there has been talk about the Jets. I think it's really these two teams. It's either the same team, the Titans, or it's the Jets. And it just, again, this just all starts, I think, with Derek Carr and maybe Aaron Rodgers kind of too. But that's why I started with this video with Derek Carr. I think it's kind of like dominoes after that, where he goes, where he ends up is could change everything. So that's why I really want to do kind of multiple predictions here. I had the next guest. Sometimes I talked about 3 or 4 teams with these because, some of these, like, not all of these are going to happen. If one thing changes, it kind of can create that, like I said, the domino effect, and it can change some things there. So that's a big reason why it's going to be a very fun, possibly unpredictable, wildly entertaining offseason. Last year was one too. And then this was just talking about quarterbacks. So kind of going down the list and talking about other players, it's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll have you covered every step of the way. We already are underway doing that. But cannot wait for, the combine's right around the corner, then free agency's here. The franchise tags that starts tomorrow. So that that gets going as well. So we got you covered here. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Follow us on Twitter. It's very, very, very important to follow us on Twitter. There's a link pinned in the comments for that. Our Discord, our sponsors. Check it all out. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.